Angkosayakano, and I will be your MC today. We warmly welcome you to the Asia GDC Forum 2025. This year's forum is centered around the theme Youth, Democracy, and Electoral Legitimacy in Asia. Asia Center is glad to host this event here in the region today. Thank you for coming despite the challenge that many of us faced last Friday. Our goal is to bring together youth representatives to discuss and address ongoing challenge and opportunities young people encounter in engaging with democratic governance and electoral process across the Asia Pacific. We are eager to hear from the diverse panelists who will offer their insights on these issues. Moreover, we explore a method for program development that enhance youth potential and create a brighter future for us all. Being present here today is testament for our commitment to promoting youth voice in democratic and electoral participation. Before we dive into today's discussion, I would like to kindly remind everyone a few basic guidelines to ensure smooth and respectful conversations. For our on-site participants, please turn off or silence your device to minimize distractions. If you need to take a call, kindly step outside the ballroom. If you have a question for the panelists, please wait for the Q&A section at the end. For the Q&A section, before asking questions, please introduce yourself, your organization, and then your question. Please keep your question brief and relevant to the discussion. For online participations, only host organization, moderator, and panelists can share their audio and video. Panelists and moderator are required to have the video turned on. The moderators will monitor the Q&A session and select questions to present to the panelists. To ask a question, the Q&A or chat features. If your question isn't selected, please be patient, as not all can be addressed due to time constraints. Kindly note that the question list during the registration have been provided to the panelist and moderator to be raised on your behalf with the panelists. To officially open today's event, it is my pleasure to invite Sanjay Cartier, Program Manager at Asia Center, to deliver opening remarks.
Hi, morning everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have all of you present over here. I know the last week's events were quite challenging, and some of us are still facing the challenges personally. But I'm glad many of us are over here at the present moment. With this, I would just give a brief introduction about Asia Center as well as what we are expecting. I hope and I'm very glad that my young colleagues over here have taken the lead in organizing this event. So a big thank you to all of them. To take actual lead on all of this. So may I request for the presentation? Thank you. So just to briefly share, Asia Center is a civil society research institute, which has special consultative status here at UN ECOSOC. We've got 4 offices. 2 offices are over here, and one is the research hub where we are mostly sitting. An AI hub is in the making, and we are hopeful that by June will be operational. And that is where the AI hub is more aimed at CSO engagement, where the digital space is a kind of a entity where we could bring in the civil society voices into the mainstream. We have a training hub that is at Phnom Penh. We also have a media hub at Johor Bahru. Next. So for us, the geographical scope that we are doing is from Thailand, we cover the region, that's the whole of Asia. From our AI hub, also, we cover up a lot of the places that's there. Cambodia office covers Laos and Vietnam as well. And from Malaysia, as the media hub, we cover the Nusantara region, or, the region in Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Timor-Leste, and Indonesia, the Bahasa-speaking countries. For us, the core activities that we have is the research, wherein we are doing a lot of baseline studies, policy briefs, needs assessments. We also do strategic planning, program evaluations. There are trainings that we do. We also conduct training, international conferences, regional convenings, capacity building workshops, mentorships as well. For the media, we are doing a lot of communication, strategic plans, and everything. We're doing the campaign strategies as well, which we undertake. The team is undertaking, so all the four offices collaborates with each other. We are also doing a lot of content development that is on interviews, op-eds, infographics, and podcasts. So most of this is all related to the ongoing project activities. We don't generate content just for creating it. We are not a purely academic institute. We are more on a practice-based research organization. We undertake advocacy. We do coordinate and drafting of the UN submissions. We do it in partnership with a lot of the organizations that we have in the region as our partners. We also do diplomatic briefings. We also do high level speakings and engagements. Next one. For our program areas, we do a lot of work on, using the UDHR three articles, Article 18, 19, 20, and 21. And that's where our focus is more on the freedom of religion or belief, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, right to political and public participation. And that's one of the themes that we are covering over here, which interlinks with a lot of other sub themes as well. Right. I just want to do a bit of a recap on what we did last year with Youth Voices Strong Choices, political participation in the Asia Pacific. So this was held in November 26th last year, and some of the key challenges that the youths had identified over there when we had our discussions was there was a youth disengagement from politics due to lack of engagement opportunities. There was also a rights violation and lack of protection due to arbitrary applications of rules and regulations. There was also a balancing activism with financial stability due to weak economic development, especially in the rural areas. And therefore, compared to the urban areas, rural youths felt they were getting a lot disconnected from the mainstream political activities that were taking place. Right. There was empowerment was lacking within the political processes, and therefore, what was also required was a legal knowledge and skills as well. Next. So what was needed was a kind of a support system that addresses the systemic corruption and economic inequalities within the youths, as well as within the overall structure as well. There was a need for engagement and encouraging volunteerism and activism among the youths, especially in the political participation. There was a call for action and a need to strengthen support for youth movements as well. And the future goals was to foster some kind of a democratic participation and representation in which the youths actually felt that their voices was getting heard. They were actively participating and engaging in the discussions and were also actively involved in implementing the decisions as well. Not just kind of their inputs taken and they are sidelined. So with that, I say thank you, everyone. Uh, what was also needed was a concerted regional effort on the addressing the challenges for youths, political and engagement across Asia Pacific. The forum that builds on discussions from the GDC over here today. We revisit some of the key insights from last year. We are trying to take it forward this year as well into the as the program is being structured by the team over here. And we are aiming that the forum over here today fosters to collaboration and a knowledge exchange that will lead to strengthening democracy in the Asia Pacific region. And that's what we are hoping that all the team members are able to kind of come here together along with you all present over here and also getting inputs from the friends who are joined online. Right. So thank you, everyone. With this, I hand over the mic back to my MC and to the younger friends over here to take the program forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay, for sharing your insight. We also have a video message from Elisenda Baliste Busso, coordinator of the Global Democracy Coalition as well.
Hello, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today and welcome you to the Asia Regional Forum of the Global Democracy Coalition. I'd like to start by acknowledging the incredibly difficult times many in the region are facing, particularly in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake last Our thoughts are with all those affected, and we stand in solidarity with our partners and communities navigating these challenges. We are especially grateful to Asia Center for continuing to host this forum. We are deeply grateful for your commitment and support, especially in moving forward with this event in the face of such adversity. We also want to thank and acknowledge those who were unable to join in person, but are participating online. Be aware that your presence and contributions matter deeply, and we are honored to have you with us. This is a particularly meaningful moment for the Global Democracy Coalition because it marks the final regional forum in our series this year. Over the past few weeks, we have had the privilege of holding regional forums in Europe, Latin America, and Africa, each one bringing together a rich diversity of voices, perspectives, and experiences. In Africa, the conversation centered around environmental justice and democracy, showing how communities are linking ecological challenges with demands for accountability and participation. In Latin America, we focus on youth leadership, spotlighting young changemakers who are leading bold efforts for transparency and inclusion. And in Europe, the discussion turned to how democratic systems can be made more resilient in the face of disinformation, polarization, and the erosion of trust. Each forum has highlighted something powerful. Democracy is local, but its challenges are global. And so is the energy, creativity, and determination to protect and strengthen it. Today, we turn to Asia, a region that is home to a large portion of the world's youth population, and where elections, whether local or national, are increasingly becoming arenas of both hope and tension. Electoral participation is the cornerstone of any democratic system, and yet, across the region, we see both promise and pressure. On the one hand, we have witnessed incredible mobilizations where youth have turned out in large numbers to vote, organize, and push for change. On the other hand, many young people remain disconnected or disillusioned from electoral processes that don't reflect their realities or include their voices. Today's forum is about both acknowledging that reality and reimagining what electoral participation can look like when youth are truly at the center, not just as voters, but as candidates, observers, advocates, and reformers. We know that the barriers are real, from restrictive laws to digital manipulation and shrinking civic space. But we also know that youth across Asia are not standing still. They are organizing, innovating, and demanding systems that are more representative, transparent, and fair. As the final forum of this year's Global Democracy Coalition journey, we are incredibly proud of what we've built together. Over 140 organizations from across sectors and regions have come together to form a truly global platform, one that has gained visibility, credibility, and more importantly, trust. The coalition has established itself as a trusted convener with a flexible and responsive structure that allows us to act quickly in today's fast-changing political environment. And our regional forums, including today's, are more than just events. They are spaces for learning, for solidarity, and for joint action. While this is the last regional forum, it's also a launchpad. We have here today will feed our shared work in 2025 and beyond into global advocacy, joint programming, and collective efforts to ensure that democracy remains meaningful, inclusive, especially for the next generation. Thank you for being part of this journey and for your continued commitment to democratic values, even when the path is hard. The courage, creativity, and determination that we see across this region give us hope. Let's make today not just a moment for reflection, but a catalyst for renewed energy, sharper strategies, and collective action. Together, we can keep democracy alive, relevant, and rooted in the people it serves. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the forum.
I hope everyone is excited for today's discussion. We have two insightful panels lined up. The first panel will focus on the challenge and issues of youth, democracy, and elections in Asia. The second panel will shift the focus to exploring potential solutions to the challenge raised in the first panel. We are now ready to begin our first panel discussion. Please welcome our panelists. Kindly note that we have some panelists joining us on site and online. We are waiting for my colleague to confirm if they all are online. Before starting, I would like to introduce our panelists. Ms. Chae Hyun Kim is the youth representative with the Korea Democracy Foundation, South Korea. She will share her perspective on the absence of young politicians in South Korea. Mr. Mustain Sahir is an editor at Sonopori and a member of the Constitutional Reform Commission. He will talk about justice and reforms after the Monsoon Revolution in Bangladesh. Ms. Chelly Mahajan is the Program and Research Manager at the Association for Democratic Reform from India, and she will talk about issues and challenge of the electoral participations and political representation of Indian youth. Ms. Chiquita Edrini Mapang is the public interest lawyer with the Legal Aid Organization from the Press of Indonesia. She will explore the power of hashtag in the Indonesian youth movement and the challenge to the status quo. Unfortunately, Mr. Akarashai Chaimuni isn't available today, but lucky for us, we have Mr. Yosathorn Niam Saing from Thai Lawyer of Human Rights will speak on his behalf. He will share his perspective on the pro-democracy movement and the criminalization of freedom of expression in Thailand. Ms. Fatin Awepute is a partnership associate from the Asia Center. She will be the moderator for panel 1. I invite everyone to take your seats or be ready online. Fatin, the floor is yours.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome our on-site guests. So, in this panel, we will talk about challenges, issues, strategies, and lesson learned in building public institution and democratic institutions. And we will cover everything from pre-elections and holding leaders accountable after elections. So, what can you expect from this panel? First, you can expect the main issues and challenges faced by youth in democracy movements across different Asian countries. So we have from Korea, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, and Thailand. Second, the impact of youth-led movements on justice, democratic progress, and justice reforms. The role of social media in organizing youth and influencing the political landscape. Strategies for making political systems more inclusive for youth, and initiatives and risks faced by young activists, and ways to create more inclusive spaces for youth by political institutions or civil society organization, and the key takeaway and potential solutions to be discussed in the next panel. So to start, just a quick reminder to our speakers that for the first question that I'm going to ask for in this panel, each of you will only have 10 minutes. So please keep an eye on the time so that we have enough space for everyone in our discussion at the end. And I don't want this panel to be just we present what we want to say, but we want to hear from our participants as well. So let's start the panel. So to explore the issues and challenges of youth and democracy movements, let's hear from South Korea, Miss Chaeyeon Kim, as she has to leave for her urgent errands after the presentation. But we happy to connect you with Chaeyeon Kim if you want to discuss further. And also, me and Miss Chaeyeon Kim, we have worked with each other with NGDC project before. So, what do you think are the main causes of these issues? I mean, the youth participation in democracy movements, and what can be done to make the political system more inclusive for youth in South Korea context.
So should I start my presentation?
Sorry, I think you are have you unmute you from your end?
Hello? Can you hear from me?
You are not audible now, but we are checking from our end as well.
So now can you hear me?
Still not audible. Sorry, but I will let you know. But it is very interesting from South Korea context because last time we've heard about the martial law, and we have seen a big movement from South Korea youth. Yeah, but from local person and the youth in South Korea, we want to hear more perspective. And last time we do the GDC podcast with Cha Hyun Kim, and I get a lot of insight. But this time we also have presentation, so it will be more insightful. Yeah. Hello. Can we
Hello?
test from your end?
Hello?
You are still can you test the
Hello?
it's work now. Thank you.
Ah, yeah. Can I start my presentation now?
Sure.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay,
Yes.
my name is Chaeyoung Kim, and I'm honored to be here today as a youth representative of the Korea Democracy Foundation. And first of all, I would like to extend my apologies in advance as I will need to leave the venue promptly after delivering my presentation due to a scheduling conflict. So I kindly ask you for your understanding. First of all, the Korea Democracy Foundation is a public institution dedicated to preserving the legacy of Korea's democratization movement and promoting democratic values through education, research, and international exchange. And it plays a crucial role in fostering civic awareness and advancing democratic governance both domestically and globally. Can you move on to next slide? Okay. So first of all, I would like to share two key agendas that I believe deserve urgent attention in today's democratic landscape. And today I will focus primarily on issues related to Korea, but I hope this presentation will also offer meaningful insights into democracy and youth politics in other countries. The first is an assessment of the current state of democracy in South Korea. And recent events such as the December 3rd martial law declaration in 2024 have raised serious concerns about the strength and stability of democratic institutions in the country. And alongside this, deepening political polarization and ongoing social conflict continue to challenge democratic dialogue and trust. And the second agenda focuses on youth representation in politics. There is a common assumption that the younger generation is simply disinterested in politics, but we must ask, is that really the case? Or are there deeper structural barriers, such as lack of access, institutional inertia, or generational hierarchies, that prevent young people from participating meaningfully in political processes? To strengthen democracy, it is essential that we critically examine not only attitudes toward politics, but also the system that either enable or obstruct participation. To further illustrate this point, we can look at the demographic composition of the 22nd National Assembly of Korea in comparison to the general population. The numbers speak for themselves. As of 2023, young adults aged 20 to 34 make up approximately 22% of the total population, a significant portion. But in the 22nd National Assembly, only 4 out of 300 members fall within this age group, accounting for a mere 1.3% of the total. In stark contrast, older adults aged 50 to 64, who comprise 29% of the population, hold 77% of the seats. This extreme imbalance clearly illustrates the structural underrepresentation of young people in political decision-making. Despite being an essential part of the electorate and having a distinct set of social and political concerns, the youth voice is largely missing from the very institutions that shape their future. And this lack of representation is not just a matter of political theory. It has very real consequences for how young people experience and respond to political crisis. Today oh, sorry, not yet. Oh, thank you. To respond to the President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, mass protests have erupted across the country, and young women have emerged as a striking presence within these movements. And one particularly symbolic act was the use of K-pop light sticks, normally associated with entertainment, as tools of resistance. These light sticks became more than objects of fandom. They served as a visual symbol of protest, capturing the creativity and conviction of Korea's younger generation. And this wave of political participation is not occurring in a vacuum. During his campaign, President Yoon pledged to abolish the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, a move widely seen as a deliberate attempt to sow division between young men and women. In this context, the rise of young women as political actors can be seen both as a reaction to authoritarianism and as a challenge to efforts that seek to fragment youth solidarity. Thank you. And now let me ask, do the younger generation really seem uninterested in politics? If anything, public interest in politics has intensified, particularly in the wake of recent political unrest. However, this increased engagement is unfortunately also accompanied by a growing sense of fatigue among young people who are constantly exposed to highly polarized and emotionally charged political discourse. And moreover, the South Korean education system, with its strong emphasis on political neutrality, has cultivated a climate in which students are often discouraged from expressing political opinions openly. And many young individuals, having grown up in such an environment, develop an instinctive reluctance toward overt political expression, even when they hold strong views. Next, please. Okay, one major structural barrier to youth representation in politics lies in South Korea's electoral system. Since 2020, South Korea has adopted a semi-linked proportional representation system. Under this system, 46 out of 300 seats in the National Assembly are allocated through proportional representation, while the remaining 253 seats are filled through single-member constituencies. And in theory, proportional representation can enhance the representatives of minority voices, including young people, women, and marginalized groups. But in practice, two major issues undermine its effectiveness. And first, the number of proportional seats is too small to ensure meaningful representation. With only 46 seats available for proportional allocation, the impact of this system remains limited. And second, the dominance of two major parties, which have created satellite parties to exploit the proportional system, has distorted its original purpose and weakened political diversity in the legislature. And despite these challenges, there has been at least one promising institutional change. In 2022, the minimum age for candidacy in South Korea was lowered to 18, and this reform could pave the way for greater youth representation in formal politics. Can you show that? Thank you. As illustrated in this graph from the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, countries that allow younger eligibility ages tend to have higher percentages of parliamentarians under age 45. And the chart shows a clear negative correlation between age of eligibility and youth representation. The earlier young people are allowed to run, the more likely they are to be elected. And this suggests that lowering the candidacy age is a meaningful step, but structural reforms must go further if we are to ensure genuine inclusion of youth in political decision making. Next, please. And another significant structural barrier to youth participation in politics is the party system itself, particularly the way in which candidates are nominated and developed. First, there is a serious lack of transparency in party nominations. Although party constitutions and internal rules often include provisions to ensure the nomination of certain number of female and young candidates, these guidelines are frequently ignored or selectively applied. The nomination process is often dominated by informal networks and opaque decision-making, leaving little room for newcomers, especially young individuals without strong political backing. And second, major political parties show a clear preference for nominating particular experts into political office, such as lawyers, former public officials, or media figures. While expertise is undoubtedly valuable, this practice reinforces elitism and closes the door on young challenges, who may bring fresh perspectives but lack conventional credentials. And third, there is little institutional commitment to developing young political leaders. Unlike some other countries that invest in long-term leadership pipelines or youth wings with real influence, Korea's major parties provide minimal support structures for political newcomers. As a result, young people are expected to navigate a high competitive and exclusionary system without adequate training, mentorship, or political capital. And without reforms in how candidates are identified, selected, and supported, it will be difficult to achieve genuine generational change in Korean politics, no matter how motivated or capable young people may be. Please, next slide, please. Thank you. In light of these structural challenges, I would like to briefly propose a few possible solutions, both at the level of political institutions and within civil society. And first, on the institutional side, we need to consider expanding the number of proportional representation seats and introducing an open list proportional representation system, which would allow voters to select individual candidates rather than simply voting for a party. And second, we must push for a more transparent nomination process within political parties, one that reflects true intra-party democracy and encourages active engagement from party members. Next, please. On the civil society side, efforts must be made to raise awareness of the need to foster young political leaders and to strengthen the relationship between elected officials and the electorate. And a good example from South Korea is the organization New Ways, which trained 138 candidates for the 2022 local elections, 40 of whom were successfully elected. And their work goes beyond simply supporting young politicians. They also aim to connect local council members with the public and address the lack of political education at the grassroots level. Next, please. And in addition, civil society must advocate for the expansion of democratic civic education. Political speech and expression should be actively encouraged, especially among youth. Countries such as Finland, Germany, and Sweden offer valuable models in this regard. And finally, it is essential to encourage the younger generation to move beyond online platforms and actively participate in offline political dialogue. Engagement in the digital space is important, but it must be complemented by real-world action to bring about meaningful change. Next, please. And to conclude, today's presentation has focused on political underrepresentation of the younger generation in South Korea. And this underrepresentation stems not only from a widespread reluctance to engage in political expression, often shaped by educational and cultural norms, but also from deep-rooted structural issues, namely the electoral system and the party nomination process. To address these challenges, I have proposed several key areas for considerations. And ultimately, creating a more inclusive and representative democracy requires more than just institutional reform, and it demands a collective effort across political parties, educational systems, and civil society to ensure that young people are not only heard, but actively shaping the future of our democracy. And thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to any question or discussion via online. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Chaeyeon Kim. This is very insightful. So, Miss Chaeyeon Kim have talked about the stereotype and assumption, and we need more proportional seat for young people in parliament, because this is where the law is from. So if we underrepresented, it's mean the law that enforced for the youth people is not for us as well, and this is for our future. Thank you so much, and we have to say goodbye to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to connect everyone with Chaeyeon Kim if you want to connect. Thank you so much. So next, let's take a look at South Asia. So, Miss Shelly Mahajan, I want to hear from you. How is youth participation in India, especially in political area, and what challenges do you think they are facing?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Okay, I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, good morning, everybody from New Delhi. I'm going to be talking about electoral participation and political representation of the Indian youth. My presentation is going to be looking at various barriers to their formal political participation and what can be done to address the gap between the burgeoning demographics in India for the youth and their political participation. So across the globe, there's a considerable population of young people aged between 15 to 24 years. Within the South Asian region, the median age is about 25 to 30 years. And as far as India is concerned, it houses world's largest youth population, with about half of its population below the age of 25. We have a national youth policy which describes youth as someone between the age of 15 to 29 years. And youth have always played a very considerable role, especially when it comes to elections and determining their electoral outcomes. Recently, in the 2014 general elections, youth played a very, very decisive role. These elections were very crucial because the youth voter turnout was one of the highest. They exceeded the average voter turnout, and it was close to about 68%. They also played a very decisive role in bringing the current party in power to form a single party majority after several decades. But what was also significant about these elections was that even though large number of young people participated and they voted, but they voted for, they elected a parliament which was the oldest as up to this point in time. So it was very interesting to see, that many young people, they voted out for politicians who were much, much older and actually led to election of a very aging parliament. So when we speak of youth participation in the political process, it's both informal and formal in nature. Informally, young people, they organize, they participate in digital activism, protest, and volunteer for various causes. However, my presentation is going to be focusing on the formal participation of the young people in the political process, primarily on two thematic areas. One is going out and casting their ballot. And secondly, I'll be looking at the scenario of, how young people contest elections in India and what is the representation of youth in the Indian Parliament and at the level of the state legislatures. Globally, last year we see that it was a very significant year. Half of the world's population went to voting. However, one key observation was that there was a relative decline in the youth voter turnout. specifically in regions like South Africa, India, US, UK, Rwanda, and Botswana. What was observed that many of the incumbent governments' performance on issues that were concerning to the young people, such as unemployment, education, climate change, health, these were some of the sectors where the governments did not perform very well. So there was a lot of apathy among the young voters, especially among the urban youth. So while a lot of young people participated in electoral activities, as far as voting is concerned, the outcome was not very significant. And on the other end, what we also see is that half of the world's population is below the age of 30 years, but only 2.8% of the parliamentarians worldwide are aged 30 or under. In case of Asia, this percentage is also very small, which is about 2.2%. What we see is that it's the baby boomer generation that dominates most of the leadership positions worldwide at an average age of about 62 years. When we look at this in the Indian context, again, the problem is pretty much a reflection of what is happening globally. Last year's general elections, there were about 49 million eligible young voters. However, only about 18 million among them registered for voting. As far as comparison with their older counterparts are concerned, young people, they tend to participate less in polls. There's also similar evidence as far as party membership and leadership is concerned. So what we are really seeing is that though youth are engaged in citizen engagement movements, they participate and organize and protest and are very politically aware. But they, as far as access to formal politics and having representation in the parliament or going out and vote, this is something which has not kind of matched up. So firstly, I'm going to look at electoral participation of the young voters in India. As mentioned in the last decade, what we've seen is there's been a relative decline in the registered youth voters from 2.7% in 2014 to now 1.9% in 2024. The average youth voter turnout has been stagnant to about 50 to 55%. In fact, one of the youngest states in India, Bihar, recorded the lowest voter registration at about 17%. In case of New Delhi, which is a hotbed for politics, the youth registration has only been about 21%. And when we look at constituencies which are led by younger politicians, again, there also we see that youth voter turnout has been very limited. Recently, there was a non-profit organization which works on youth issues. It's based in New Delhi. They came out with a survey, and their sample size was about 5,000 respondents. The observation made in the survey is also quite similar, that about 46% of the young people have engaged in citizen forums, advocacy groups. They participate in social movements. But as far as formal participation is concerned, 29% of the respondents preferred not to engage in politics at all. Similar evidence can also be seen when it comes to becoming members of a political party, where only 11% respondents showed any interest. And in terms of supporting political parties on social media or grassroots campaigning, again, the percentage is quite dismal. When we compare the scenario to countries like Indonesia, Cambodia, Thailand, and Philippines, what we see is that unlike in India, such countries have, political parties in these countries have stronger links with the youth population. Just, I think, yeah. So speaking about some of the barriers to voting, what we see is that there is a lot of disengagement and disillusionment when it comes to traditional political mechanisms. What we see is that there's a disconnect between the political leadership and the young population. Many issues which are concerning the youth, such as unemployment, health, and education, these have not a lot of progress has been made. In between elections, not a lot of issues. When we look at youth manifestos, party's agenda, they do not address youth issues to the extent it should be. So there's a perception about elections that, going out and vote may not change a lot of things. It may not have any sort of effect. So there's a lot of voter apathy, especially among the urban youth. Then with rapid urbanization and globalization, the other thing that we see is that the youth aspirations have reshaped over a period of time. They have a lot on their plate to think of their career, and somehow politics has sometimes also take a backseat. But one very important challenge in India that we face is because there is no provision for online voting or remote voting. What we see is that every election, a lot of votes are actually lost because of internal migration. A huge number of youth, they migrate. And because they find it very challenging to go back to their home state to cast ballot, many times they're unable to cast their vote. So that is also a very big challenge. Then with the impact of misinformation, disinformation, AI generated content, what we've also seen, and many surveys have also kind of proved that Young people, especially first-time voters, are very vulnerable. They're overwhelmed with all the information overload, and this has also kind of eroded their trust in the electoral process and kind of created apathy. Moving on to political representation of Indian youth, what we see is that youth in the parliament and assembly are considered somewhere between the age of 25 to 40. The average age of an Indian citizen is somewhere about 27.8 years. But when you compare it with the average age of our current parliament, it is 56 years. So there's a median age gap between those who are governing and those who are being governed. In fact, 76% of our ministers are between the age of 51 to 80 years. When you compare this with the first general elections that happened in India, the average age at that point in time was only 46.5 years. So we can see that the Indian parliament has been aging. In fact, when we look at the proportion of young people contesting elections, it's only about 31 to 32% of the total number of candidates that are between the age of 25 to 40 years. In terms of local governance, again, because of migration, the involvement of the rural youth in panchayats and local governance has also not been very significant. The average age of these panchayats are about 36 to 50 years, again, not very, very young. And when we speak of the Youth Representation Index value, which kind of gives a proportion of young people in parliament relative to its population share, what we again see is that there's been a lot of decline, especially since the first general elections, when the value was about 156, to now it has come down to 41. This clearly creates a democratic deficit, and there's a huge disconnect between the young people and the people who are representing in the parliament. So there's this disconnect between the youth and nation's legislative body. Now, when we look at the barriers to contesting elections in India, running for public office is extremely expensive. Factors like money and muscle power are predominant. Anyone who wants to contest elections cannot do it solely on the basis of merit, because it's money and muscle power that determines who walks through the corridors of power. As a result, there's also this image of the politics being dirty and as a corrupt system, which also is seen as a very risky career option for the young people. There's also systemic exclusion of the young people in favor of older, male and wealthy politicians, because political parties also favor those politicians who've spent more years, have experience, and they're also very, very wealthy. So that's another very crucial barrier. Then there's also the problem of high minimum age requirement of 25 years, which is a complete mismatch with the voting age in India right now, which is at 18 years. Political dynasty, another reality. Some of the youngest MPs in India actually come from politically influential families. They come from networks which are highly influential. So those who are basically only running on the basis of merit find it very challenging. When we speak of women, they go through double discrimination, both on the basis of their age and their gender. There's also absence of youth quotas within political parties, and no seats are reserved within the parliament for young people. We also see that with every election, it's the same politicians which are contesting elections every time and winning them. So there's very less opportunities for newcomers to be able to, penetrate into formal politics. Then there's lack of inner party democracy. The way tickets are distributed within political parties is also something which is not very, very transparent. What we can say is that youth, they play a very decisive role in, poll outcomes. They're a very crucial voting bloc. However, issues that concern the young people are not on the agenda of the political parties. Despite the best efforts by the Election Commission of India, we also see that the youth voter turnout has not been very substantial. There's systemic exclusion of the young people. There's widening median age gap between voters and political candidates. And as mentioned earlier, there's also a lot of adverse impact of misinformation and disinformation. So what can we really do about it? I think it's important to have a culture of informed, involved, and engaged citizenship. We need to encourage more student leadership, and from a very early age, it's important that we revamp and impart civic and political education. There's also need to simplify the enrollment process so that more and more young people are able to register for voting. In India, I think it's very important that we have a remote voting provision so that we don't lose any votes on account of internal migration. At the same time, there's also need to enhance media literacy so that young people are able to identify misinformation. There's a need to create safe spaces for marginalized groups, especially women, LGBTQ, and differently abled people. And it's also very important to acknowledge diversity among the youth population. Youth quotas, again, very, very important. Certain number of youth leaders must be financially backed by political parties, or there must be some sort of provision for state subsidies to provide to the young people. There's also an international recommendation to align eligibility for running for public office with voting age so that we have more and more young people contesting elections. Most importantly, there's also a need to reduce money and muscle power in politics so that we can eradicate the entry barriers and more young people are able to, encourage to contest elections on the basis of merit. And lastly, it's very important to establish youth caucuses and committees within the parliament, which are led by young MPs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miss Shelley. So, Miss Shelley has raised a lot of concern. The issues and challenges for youth in India, especially for political landscape, and then the disengagement of youth participation. So we can discuss further about how to address youth agenda. Should we just link youth with the political party, or should we just establish youth political party? We can discuss further after this. Thank you so much, Miss Shelley. This is very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, next, let's turn to our Southeast Asia country. So we have two. We have Indonesia and Thailand, but we would start with Indonesia first. Miss Shikita, hello. Yeah. So social media has played a significant role in organizing youth in your
Hello.
country, Indonesia. And could you share how youth movements on social media have impacted the political landscape in Indonesia? And what challenges are young activists facing in this space?
Right. I hope that my voice is clear enough. Well, hello everyone.
Hi, you're
Can
audible.
you hear me? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Cita Edrin and I'm from the Legal Aid Center for the Press, or we call it as LBH Pers. We are focused on protecting press and journalists as the fourth pillar of democracy, to be as independent and free from any kind of intervention and threats, and to provide more access of information to public. I think I would like to request for helping me to present the slides. Yes, thank you. Maybe we can move on to the next slide, please. So today's presentation I would like to focus on the power of hashtags in the Indonesian youth movements and their challenges to the status quo. Since currently Indonesia Parliament has enacted the new amendments of the National Armed Forces law. The process of this enactment actually has been very close from civil participations, and it's highly potentially weakening the democratic values and freedom of expression in general. Next, maybe we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. One of the concerning issues is the military presence in civilian roles, which threaten the democracy and civil supremacy. And in addition of it, our organizations have been addressing one of the expansions of military authority in the military operation other than war, or we call it as OOTW, which is through the cyber operations, and it actually violates the basic human rights standards. And I would like to provide you three main backgrounds and situations of democratic and civic space condition in Indonesia, which is first, as I've been mentioned before, civil supremacy is under threats as the new legislation of national armed forces has been enacted. And then the second one, actually, the freedom of expressions and civic space has been really weakening and suppressed by some of the law enforcement and the national regulations that have the most serious threats to journalists. And the last thing is about the political dynasty and judicial interventions under the Indonesian's elections process throughout to 2024. Next slide, please. Maybe to provide you more information about the young movement and youth movement in Indonesia, as you can see on the screen, actually we have most the active social media platforms users, which is dominated by the youth communities. And some of the Indonesian youth movement have been really developed, and that's why I try to evaluate and try to reflecting this kind of movement, whether it's really affecting our democratic situation in Indonesia. So the main background why I take this title is because the hashtags movement in Indonesia have been developed through the COVID-19 pandemic situations on 2020, where people have very limited spaces together. Meanwhile, the government at that time on 2020, they're drafting very controversial laws such as omnibus law on job creation law, and some of the academics, labor movement, and then the civil society have been working, have been taking concern on the issues of endanger the environmental and sustainability of the indigenous peoples and especially the workers' rights. And this hashtag has been called as cancel the omnibus law and has become the trending topic on some of the social media platforms. Next slide, please. And as you can see, what we do throughout the online movement, some of us is signing the online petitions and then searching for information throughout online. And then other than that, we also the online platform also has become the tools for the youth to be organizing the political activism both in online and offline platform, and they also trying to organize people to joining the demonstration and strikes throughout this online platform. Next slide, please. But the other kind of issues that have been reflected throughout this movement is the question is, does social media has become the fifth pillar of democracy, as we know that the trias politica is the legislative, executive, and then also the press as the fourth pillar. But the main and the biggest question is, does social media has become the fifth pillar of democracy? Our organization has found out the phenomena of media shifting, which should switch or expand their works throughout social media platform. There are both agreement on this. Like in the positive way, it has led to provide more diverse and broaden the alternative options to access on information. And for the youth movement, the online platform, it has led to a more sustainable political engagement and facilitating as a tool for the new forms of civic and political engagement. Next slide, please. And in other hand, meanwhile on the contra side, it also leads to the struggle with the content moderation, as our fellow friends has already mentioned as well. The struggle with the content moderation, misinformation, and disinformation issues, our organization has answered these kind of problems, how to engage with some of the fact checker communities. But for the movement, it's also lead to what it's called as selectivism. Some of the academics have found out this phenomenon, which is the online platform has led to the meaningless or ineffective to bring people and to bring the youth to the real life political movements outcome. They don't want to participate on the offline demonstrations, meanwhile, because they think that the online platform has enough. So, and other than that, it's also raise the risks of self-censorship because the spread of misinformations is leading to the lack of sustaining meaningful engagement between and among the young generations. Next slides, please. So this is the advantage and disadvantage of the reflection of Indonesian hashtag movement. First, it has led to empower and provide a narrative of structural story of the social movement, and it creates imaginary communities which enable us, the youth, to share opinions during discussions such as this forum. But in the other hand, the presence of virtual community may shapes the user behavior on a relative shortly time, and it also starts to polarizations on political views. Next slide, please. So what's next after like 20 years of Indonesian reformations and democracy? Next slide, please. These are some of the recommendations that I have been identified. First, it really needs to civil society for the civil and communities, especially for the youths, to consolidate more under the systemic major purpose. So we have to identify a structural um,
Hello, Miss Chiquita, we lost you for no. Hi. I think it's technical issue from Miss Chiquita end, but I think it's almost the end of presentation already. So um it's okay, we just wait for her to resume, but I will just conclude. Miss Chiquita has raised the movements in Indonesia, which is similar to Thailand context, because we also use social media mainly. But what's next after social media? What should we do? Because social media, as she has mentioned, that it's short and it's maybe not reflect real world politics. So this is also lead to our discussion also in the second panel and afternoon session that we're gonna discuss about these issues. So yeah, I think Southeast Asia context is similar. So we want to hear from Thailand because we have our colleagues from human rights, Thai human rights lawyer, um, Thai lawyer for human rights, Mr. Yosathon. Um, so my question is that can you share the initiatives that your organization is working on? And what are the biggest risks that young politicians facing? And how can they push despite all those challenges? Yeah. How can they push for um, democratic democratic movements?
Oh, hi everyone. Just to start, I would like to introduce our organization a little bit. Our organization is Thai Lawyers for Human Rights. We were formed 2 days after the coup in 2014 that ousted a democratically elected government and placed the country under military rule. So we were established then to provide legal assistance to anyone who's been prosecuted or who's been summoned and tried in military courts. But since then, we've evolved our organization to encompass human rights violations, documentation, and international advocacy as well. So that's a bit of a background on our organization. So in terms of Thailand, I think I'd be remiss to not talk about what happened in 2020. So in 2020, there was a pro-democracy movement that swept Thailand. And what's unique about this movement is the fact that it's primarily spearheaded by youth and students. So they came out in 2020 to advocate for primarily three things. One is the amendment of the Thai constitution, which was drafted by the military. Two is the amendment of the lèse majesté law, or the royal defamation law. And lastly, the reform of the monarchy institution. Next slide, please. And since then, almost 2,000 people have been charged under various repressive laws. We're talking about laws such as the lèse majesté law, laws such as the Computer Crimes Act, laws such as the Emergency Decree and Public Assembly Act. You can see the statistic in the graph there. Next slide, please. So today, I want to talk briefly about 5 key topics. One is political prosecution, which I already discussed a little bit. 2 is the issue of the lèse majesté law. 3rd is children's rights in Thailand. 4th is political detainees, political prisoners, or arbitrary detention in Thailand. And lastly, the judiciary. And then I'll be maybe discuss the questions that you asked me today. Firstly, the lèse majesté law. So the lèse majesté law, or the royal defamation law, is located in section 112 of the Thai Criminal Code, and it stipulates that whoever defames, insults, or threatens the king, the queen, the heir apparent, or the regent shall be punished with imprisonment of 3 to 15 years, which is the equivalent of manslaughter in the Thai criminal code. Next slide, please. So what is the first issue that I want to highlight with the lèse majesté law? Well, the definition of defame, insult, or threaten have been expanded by Thai courts over the years to encompass any innocuous acts. So we've seen acts such as conducting a public opinion poll about the monarchy. We've seen acts such as giving a speech in a peaceful public assembly. We've seen acts such as wearing a crop top or wearing a traditional Thai dress at pro-democracy events be seen as to have violated the lèse majesté law. Next slide, please. The next issue I want to discuss with the lèse majesté law is the fact that its sentences is disproportional. As I mentioned, 3 to 15 years is the equivalent of manslaughter. And I think that the disproportionate sentence can be highlighted with the very first example here. Mr. Bas Mongkol Tirokot, our client, he was early last year, he was sentenced to over 50 years in prison under the lèse majesté law. So what did he do? He shared around 25 clips on Facebook that the court saw to have violated the law. Some of the clips that he shared included John Oliver, Last Week Tonight Show, an episode on the Thai monarchy, or a BBC documentary titled Soul of a Nation, or a sitcom, American Dad. For all these clips, 50 years in prison. Another case I want to highlight is the third example, our colleague Arno Nampa. He is a human rights lawyer, currently detained in prison at the moment. He's been convicted in 7 lèse majesté cases for giving speeches at public assemblies, peaceful public assemblies. He was actually recently convicted in another case, his 7th case last week. So his sentence is actually up to 21 years. So that is an example of disproportionate sentencing under the lèse majesté law. Next slide, please. Now, what's interesting about the lèse majesté law is that it came after a 2-year hiatus where the law was enforced, but following a period where students and people were coming out to protest, then Prime Minister General Prayut declared that all laws and all articles would be used against protesters, bringing back the law into force. Now we were seeing more than 300 lèse majesté cases against at least 278 individuals. Next slide, please. Now, as I alluded to earlier, children were at the forefront of the pro-democracy movement. In fact, our youngest client was only 12 when he was convicted under the emergency decree for riding a bicycle near a protest area. You can see the charges over there. More than 280 children, I believe the number is 286 children, have been charged and prosecuted for exercising their freedom of expression and peaceful assembly here in Thailand. But what's new is the fact that the lèse majesté law and sedition, so 2 laws with very high penalties, are also being used against children in Thailand as well. Next slide, please. Now, in 2023, Thailand had an election, and we have a civilian-led government now under the Pheu Thai administration. However, the situation of political prosecution, including lèse majesté, have not stopped. The trend still continues, and you can see the charges there on screen right now. Next slide, please. Now, the next issue I want to talk about is that of political prisoners in Thailand. So currently we have 46 political prisoners in detention, which is a huge increase compared to December of last year. We had around 33 political prisoners, so a huge upsurge. Also, 29 prisoners are currently detained under Section 112, so the majority of political prisoners are detained under the law. And around 27, 28 are detained pending trial or appeal. So the principle of presumption of innocence is not respected here. Next slide, please. Now, the next issue that I want to talk about is that of the judiciary. Unfortunately, the battle for democracy and civic space in Thailand is no longer fought in the streets, on the streets rather, it's fought in the courtroom. So when it comes to the judiciary, there are 3 primary issues I want to talk about. One is the independence of judges. So what I mean by independence of judges is that in 2019, there was a Supreme Court regulation that came out that requires judges to submit draft judgments or orders to their supervisor judges for their supervisory review. So, for instance, for any important decision in national security cases, so lèse majesté and sedition, they would have to submit their draft orders and important decisions to their higher ups. So decisions, what sort of decisions? Such as granting bail to defendants, or postponing trials, or the decision to issue subpoenas for the defendant, for instance. So these important decisions have to be submitted to their supervisors before they can make any important decision. So that's an example of a lack of independence of judges per se. So what would be a common occurrence would be judges in our courtroom. Judges would have to leave the courtroom to discuss with their higher ups and then come back into the courtroom, and then we know what they were doing. Second issue is the impartiality of judges. Our lawyers have seen judges making negative comments about our clients' alleged conduct even before the trial has started. For instance, in Mr. Arna Nampa's case, a judge told him that the reason that you're here, the reason that you're being prosecuted, is because you've overstepped the monarchy. So that's an example of a judge being perhaps not impartial. And lastly, there's an issue of fair trial rights in Thailand. As I alluded to earlier, there are 46 political prisoners in Thailand at the moment. And one of the key issues with the lèse majesté law is the fact that the decision to grant bail, well, bail is rarely granted to defendants under the lèse majesté law. In fact, last year we submitted, I think, over 180 bail requests for a defendant, and around 91% was rejected by Thai courts. Another issue is that judges would refuse to issue subpoenas that are for documents and witnesses that are very important to the defense of our clients. As you can imagine, some of our clients are accused of having spoken falsehoods about the king. So it would be very important for them to have the necessary documents for them to fight their cases. However, the court's refusal to issue subpoenas for these important documents mean that they're unable to fight on equal grounds and fight to the fullest. Next, please. Now, what is the solution to all of this political discord? If we go even further back in the since the coup in 2006, over 5,000 people have been charged and/or prosecuted under various repressive laws, either from across the political spectrum. We think that if the government insists on prosecuting every case to the very end, we think that Thailand would be stuck in a cycle of political discord for years and years to come. So our solution is the People's Amnesty Bill. So last year we submitted a bill into Parliament, the People's Amnesty Bill, to grant amnesty to victims of political prosecution across the political spectrum. What's unique about our bill is that, one, it automatically grants amnesty to those charged under the lèse majesté law. And two, it addresses the issue of impunity by not granting amnesty to government officials who've been accused of conducting themselves unlawfully or committing human rights violations to suppress protesters. In fact, today, the bill will be discussed in Parliament after being kind of stalled for a while. So we hope to hear good news on this front as well. Next issue, please. Next slide, please. Now, the last issue I want to talk about today is that of the party dissolution and risk of lifetime ban for the former Move Forward Party MPs. So as I alluded to earlier, Thailand had an election in 2023, and the winner, the party that won the most seats, was the Move Forward Party. Now, the Move Forward Party, they were unfortunately dissolved in August of 2024, not for amending the lèse majesté law, but for proposing to amend the law. Now, but this is not the end of the story. Now, 44 MPs who sponsored the bill are now at risk, are now accused of committing ethical violations by sponsoring the bill. So now they're at risk of a lifetime ban from holding office in politics. And we think that this is highly concerning as well. Their case is currently with the National Anti-Corruption Commission. And in terms of the timeline, we're unsure when we'll see the news on this as well. Next slide, please. Yes, so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yusaton. So, I also define myself as a young advocate in Thailand as well. And during my time in university, I have also, learned and know the esteemed work from Thai human rights lawyer organization. So, we can say that Thai youth are very, very eager and want to participate in politics, but we face a lot of obstacle issues and challenges, mainly about legal and also judiciary system process. Yeah, that's also lead to our further discussion later. So, hello, Miss Shikita. Now you are resumed with us. So I would like to ask. I'm also happy to open for you to wrap up our your presentation as well. Yeah. And also, unfortunately, Mr. Mustain from Bangladesh cannot join us today. And from his short bio, I'm also happy to connect you with him if you want to further discuss or want some more insight from Bangladesh. So I would like to hear from Miss Shikita for the wrap up of the presentation.
All right, thank you. I'm really sorry. I think there are some connections issue on here in Indonesia. So, to just wrap up to close like my presentations, I think I will just want to emphasize regarding the solutions, is the engagement with the international communities, such as what we have been doing today. I think is one of the very important key things that we have been done, because as today we have discussed and sharing a lot of challenges and problems that we discovered in each ASEAN countries. So I think it's really important for us to be to build the solidarity and then also learn from each other, such as what have been discussed here. And the best practices we have been doing throughout the movement, how to organize youth and young people, and also how to engage with the political party, and then how we discover some of the legislation, like the problematic legislation, and then the judiciary issues from one and another. I think that's all to wrap up a brief about from my presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this is the next part of our panel. So I would like to open questions from participants. So you can pass questions to our colleagues, and also in online you can raise your hand if you have any questions or any discussion or any insight that you want to know from our panelists today. So we have from Thailand, we have from Indonesia, India, and yeah. You can raise your hand if you have any discussion or want have anything to like ask. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Oliver, and I'm from Thammasat University studying about politics. So my question is, and I'm from Myanmar. So my question is to Thailand. So my question is, today, the Prime Minister of Thailand is inviting to the military junta of our country as a country leader in Thailand. So what is your opinion about that? And the second thing is, why don't you think that the current prime minister can shape the pro-democracy movement?
Sorry, the second question is if the current prime minister can change the pro-democracy movement?
Why don't you think that the current prime minister can play a crucial role to shape the pro-democracy of Thailand?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. To answer your first question, with the military junta arriving in Thailand, we think that we'll have to see. I think this perhaps violates the consensus of ASEAN, but we'll just have to see how it develops. Yeah, for the first question. And the second question with the current prime minister and sort of her role in the pro-democracy movement. We think that the current situation with the Pheu Thai government is that perhaps they are restricted a little bit with what they can do. In fact, when it comes to amnesty, we're still waiting to see if they'll come out with their own version of an amnesty bill, and if whether or not they'll include Section 112 as well. But what we can observe is that the Pheu Thai government is focusing primarily on the economy, on things like the negotiation between the EU and Thailand FTA, and not so much about civil and political rights. We think that, unfortunately, as I said in our presentation, the trend of political prosecution in Thailand has not ended with the Thai government coming into power. We hope to see it change. We would really want to see, political prisoners being able to come out and, see their families again. But we'll just have to see how big of a role that they can play on this.
Do we have any more question from our room? Otherwise, I have some survey that I have observed pre the event. So I will just throw general questions, and which panelist wants to answer this question, you can raise your hand. So given growing importance of youth in shaping democratic process across Asia, do you think young people are better off joining traditional political party structures, or should they have separate political wings to advocate for their unique needs and challenges? How do these different structures affect their long-term political influence and electoral legitimacy? Do we have any panelists want to answer to this question? Maybe we want to hear from Miss Shelley about this question.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I think if we were to speak in the Indian context, I feel what we see in India right now is that young people are actually very, very involved in all sorts of citizen engagement movements. There is what we have is a public consultation law also, so there's feedback on policies. But what I really feel is what is lacking is that the parliament which or the representatives which decide their future, when it comes to political institutions, several important bodies, the representation is lacking in those areas. So while we have all sorts of activism, while we have young people shaping lots of narratives and discourses around every election, we see that they participate in election activities. What is really missing is their access to formal politics, to be able to hold key decision-making power. So in India, political parties also have their own youth wings. And we see that many young people are also represented in political parties. But what happens is that there are not enough avenues for them to actually climb up the ladder and hold important policy-making decision positions in the parties, or from there they're able to they're being given tickets, So there are these kind of barriers. So while it's very, very important that within the civic space, within youth wings, there is ample youth participation and representation. But what is really, really important is that they're also holding key positions, whether it's in the political parties, in electoral management bodies. Those are the kind of things I think which are very important, so that they're also able to have power to shape policies which are going to decide their future. So I feel that is something that we are lacking and we need to work towards.
Thank you so much, Miss Shelley. So now the last question I want to hear from Miss Shikita. This is quite broad question, but I think it's good to lead to the next panel. What are the 5 broader solutions to counter democracy backsliding that would be applicable to all nations of the world?
All right, thank you so much for the questions. I think it's a very, yeah, again, like broad question. Because to pick only 5 key points to counter the democracy backsliding, I think the very first thing we have to taking concern is, of course, the democracy pillar itself. As our organizations is also focusing on the 4th pillar of democracy, which is the press and the journalists. We are currently like the journalists even like couldn't have the access to be independent, and they have been same with what happened with with Thailand and other countries around the world. Like they have been suppressed and threatened. Even the current situation, the journalists are getting a lot of terror coming under the militaristic system or authoritarianism system. It will be impossible for us to be speak up for our voices. That's why like the second important things is to ensure the political participations of the youth to be specific, and also a lot of young movements have to be engaged. Meaningful participation throughout the legislation process is a must. So the leading to that, the third key points, I think it's important um, to answer how to tackling the democracy backsliding is to also engage throughout the whole stakeholders, not only the like maybe we are talking about youth today, but it's also important to engage the whole communities coming from the grassroots movement as well, the indigenous people, and then the communities that coming from each of the local societies. I think it's crucial to echoing our voices to the top legislator and then the decision maker, so that our needs have been heard, can be heard. And then the fourth key points, I think we have to taking concern as well about the access of informations. Again, the media have to be independent because nowadays the social media have been like evolved and developed a lot and very fast. Even like maybe we will discuss more about AI on the like second panel today, but this has making and creating some very new problems again that we have to discuss and discover how to tackling these issues and how it's important on shaping the democracy and how it's also threatened the democracy itself. And then the fifth key point, maybe it's really must a political party has value, because in Indonesia itself, like we still discover there are no oppositions on the like political parties on the executive and legislative. And then how the judicial system has also been watched by the people and by the societies. It's really a must so that the system can be worked under society's control and then under the citizens' control. I think that's the 5 key points that I would emphasize. Answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Shikita. And unfortunately, this panel already, the time is already up. So I would like to thank and please give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for the insightful conversation, and we look forward to.
Thank you, our panelists, for such insightful discussion. And also thank you, Fatin, for the moderation. Before we take a short coffee break, we would like to take a group photo for all of us for this special moment. Could you guys please come to the front of the stage, like here, for group pictures, if that's okay. Please, to the front. For people who is not that tall, can you please go up on the stage so we can see, everybody in the pictures? Oh, not everybody's tall, I guess. Very tall.
Yeah.
Please come back here at 11 a.m. for the next panel. We have the tea outside of the room. Enjoy your tea break. Please keep in mind that we have 5 more minutes for our break. I would like to kindly ask everyone to head back inside and take your seats. The next panel will start in like a minute or two. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you ready for our section panel discussion. This panel title is Breaking Barrier for Youth Participation in Politics. Please welcome our panelists and kindly note that we have some panelists joining us on site and online. Before starting, I would like to introduce our panelists. Ms. Janet Tan is the documentation coordinator at Suara Rakyat for Suram for Malaysia. She will share her perspective on strengthening youth agency and civic action for human rights and social change in Malaysia. Ms. Lilian is the founder of the Politics for Women in Myanmar. She will share her insight on changing role of youth and women in politics in Myanmar. Dr. Alan H. Yang is an executive director of the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundations. We offer his recommendation on enabling youth activism, solidarity between Taiwan and Southeast Asia. Ms. Chompunot Chalembun is the regional program manager at the Westminster Foundation based in Thailand. She will share her insights on the barriers, challenge, and violence against women and politics, with an emphasis on Thailand. Ms. Nadia Ivanova is the director of the Center of Human Rights and Democracy at People in Need from Czech Republic. She will share her insights on the safe mechanism for increasing youth civic engagement in circumstance repression. Mr. Ekmongkon Puridet is a researcher from the Asia Center. He will be the moderator of the panel too. Ekmongkon, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. I hope we are audibly clear from this side. So we're now in the second panel, and we want this panel to be an interlude between what we discussed in the first panel, which has focused mainly on the problems, the structural problems, and the other types of problems that are facing youth nowadays in their participation in politics. This panel, we want to talk more about different ideas for solutions. We wanted to get expertise and insights on different types of political engagements and different ideas, as well as best practices, success, or even challenges or gaps in these sort of solutions that are practiced in different countries. Then, with this information in mind, in the afternoon, we will come here again, divide into groups, and then we all would discuss solutions on how we can help foster youth engagement. So we will take this panel as sort of a insight and just some basic ideas, which we will develop further in this afternoon. Before we start, I want to expand a bit what we mean by youth in politics. Yes, youth in politics means politics in the close sense, youth in parliament, youth wings in political parties, and youth MPs. But we also mean youth in governance. They might be in different ministry, different state bodies, how youth can have a career path in those sort of governance frameworks, but also youth in civil society, and how youth can be more engaged and have more role in the civil society in respective countries, but also in a regional sense. So with that, I would like to start first with Ms. Jernel from Suram. So Ms. Jernel will focus on Malaysia and the role of the youth on civic actions for human rights and social change. So the question I want to frame now for Ms. Tan is, what should the youth do in that regard?
Hi everyone. Hope you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Wait, so can I proceed just to check? Can I proceed with my presentation, or am I just informally answering your question?
Oh, yeah, you can proceed with the presentation.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, if we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. And the next one. Yeah, and the next one. You'll just go straight to the next one. Yeah, thanks. So just to give everyone, hi everyone, just to give everyone an overview of student activism in Malaysia before we go into the before we give everyone a glimpse of the programs that SWARM does and also the barriers that Malaysian youth face when it comes to civic and political participation. So what I would like to emphasize in this particular slide is that when it comes to youth activism in Malaysia, it's very much closely tied to activism carried out by university students. And the golden era that a lot of us in the civil society sector refer to when it comes to youth activism is actually in the 1970s, where our current Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim came from as well. So even during his time in 1970s, university students were a lot more radical, were a lot more vocal than the current generation, whereby they were very much engaged in protests, going down to the ground to visit grassroots communities, and they went as far as even sharing their manifestos with the politicians of the day in the lead up to elections. In fact, because the students of the day at that time, they were so active politically, that led to the government implementing what, as you can see, the Universities and University Colleges Act 1971. So that was a tool used by the government of the day to sort of suppress student activism by giving more control from the government to manage universities. So ALCO, in short, is a very regressive legislation that allows the government to appoint chancellors within public universities, and from there, that's where they exert control, because the chancellors then will be able to decide who they hire as academics, deans, and etc. And because of what was done in the 1970s, it's had a very important domino effect in restricting, or rather creating this culture where students are a lot less timid when it comes to expressing their opinions and holding their programs on campus. Yeah. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. So essentially, in terms of the involvement of students historically in civil society movements in Malaysia, at least for SWARAM's perspective, one very important one would be the advocacy for the repeal of the Internal Security Act. So for everyone's knowledge, the Internal Security Act was repealed eventually in 2012, but before that, it was a very long 20 to 25 years sort of advocacy from various sectors, and young people were a part of it. The reason why we brought up this particular movement is because some of the activists who were detained under the Internal Security Act at that time freshly came out from universities, or they came from university environments that were very vocal, very dynamic, very much they had this culture of student activism. So for example, Hishamuddin Rais or Syed Hussein Ali, these were the two individuals who came from University of Malaya, which had a very vibrant history of student activism. And because of these activists who were then detained in detention centers during the ISA's enforcement period, that somehow catalyzed the repeal ISA movement, and that sort of helped give birth to more protests as well from different segments of society when it comes to civil and political rights. But yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So essentially about what ISA is about, just to give people an overview, essentially you don't go through court. If you were to get caught at that time under the ISA, you would straight away be locked up in a detention center. It can be anywhere, whether it's in Kamuting Perak or Taiping or, in any other state, for 60 days straight. And they can detain you indefinitely. And one very prominent characteristic for detainees from ISA at the time is that quite a few of them experience torture whilst being detained. It can be physical, it can be sexual. Next slide, please. So the ISA was a very old thing in a way. I guess maybe some of you guys may be aware or may have heard of the Bersih movement from Malaysia, which campaigns for free and fair elections. So the Bersih movement is one definitely where young people has in one way or another participated as well. And you will see that in the next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. Yep. So essentially, this is just a snapshot of, young people's involvement back then in the repeal against ISA movement. So if you look to your right, this GMMI thing, so Gerakan means movement, Mahasiswa means university student, Mansoka means repeal. So the GMI, which is the movement to repeal the ISA, was first set up, and it was primarily spearheaded by family members. But because of the detention of the young activists as well, and because at that time, university students were also quite involved with civil society when it comes to advocating for issues, and so shortly after the GMI was born, GMMI came about as well. And as you can see in the slide here, they did, come together with civil society and also the family members of IC detainees themselves when it comes to advocating for the repeal, such as, the huge protests where 30,000 people turned up at Sogo, which is a very prominent area for protests to call for repeal of the legislation. Next slide, please. Yeah, and Bersay is definitely one. Most of us may know, about the protests, especially like Bersay 3 and 4, where the police use tear gas against protesters and etc. So, and young people, even the involvement of young people, in order to advocate for free and fair elections, coverage was relatively lesser. So these two would be the ones that we know. So one would, as you can see in the middle, Anis Shafika Muhammad Yusuf. So she was a very prominent student activist at the time. In fact, she was, even before Bersay, she was involved in quite a few high-profile protests when it comes to advocating against corruption. And so Anis herself was arrested before the Bersay rally, and that's a significant one. And she was in university back then. So if you look to your right, so Bersay, as some of you might know as well, it's not just in Malaysia. It also gave birth to Bersay movements in other countries where Malaysians resided. And one of it was the USA. And as you can see in the slide, Nur Adila. So Nur Adila was studying in the United States under a scholarship at the time. And she undertook it upon herself to set up a Bersay movement, in her locality in the United States. And she went on to educate the public, Malaysians, about um, the free and fair elections movement, etc. And when it comes to the Malaysian tertiary education landscape, if you are under a scholarship who goes to pursue study overseas, normally the government will set restrictions in terms of getting involved, let's say in civic civic movements, at a very high profile level. So normally they do not allow that. And as you can see here, Adila faced reprisal for, choosing to undertake activism while she was studying. So that's another instance of, a young person exercising her freedom of expression whilst she is pursuing her studies. Yep. Next slide, please. Yep. So essentially, why students strike? So at least from Malaysia's history, again, as portrayed in 1970s, accessing youth in universities would be a little bit more easier. And most importantly, it's also a strategic decision because when it comes to public universities, they would house or they would host Malaysian students from all states. It doesn't matter whether you're poor, whether you are middle class. You would find Malaysians of diverse backgrounds there, from whether it's liberal, conservative, you name it, different ethnicities and etc. So because of this, accessing students to educate them about human rights and to get them involved in civic participation would be a very strategic move for, let's say, civil society organizations like Suaram. And also, another very important part is, of course, the activities that you get to engage students in. So, for example, by collaborating with lecturers, let's say to organize trips, let's say to Orang Asli villages, to get the students to understand, let's say, the marginalization that Orang Asli goes through, or if you want to collaborate with faculty advisors, let's say, to host programs, to educate students, on human rights. So these are the various avenues that you can undertake, which is a lot more easier as compared to trying to access, for example, youth who might be working in rural areas. So that's one very key reason why university students. And traditionally as well, when it comes to university students, they have been a very valuable partner, let's say, to access rural communities, to conduct projects, to work with them, to help rural communities to advocate for changes in their communities. So this is also another reason why. Next slide, please. So as to the barriers, I'll just quickly touch on. I mean, this is an entire list. I'm just going to give you a narrative of what I've seen within the last 3 to 4 years whilst in civil society. So youth agency wise, at least from Swaram side, we do see a few things. One is one key barrier is definitely the host of freedom of expression laws that were passed. So for example, last year we had the regressive amendments to the Communications Multimedia Act passed. We also, the government is also mulling over expansion of the Printing Press and Publications Act to also control publications that are online. Not to mention, you also have the social media licensing framework, which tries to gain more control over social media companies, and that might affect censorship. So things like this can have an indirect effect when it comes to online freedom of expression. And as we all know, young people these days, they tend to express themselves online a lot more often than on the ground in protests. And personally, I've also seen that it's actually harder to get people to attend protests, especially after the pandemic, as compared to before the pandemic, and youth even more so. Another very important thing is also definitely the dynamics when it comes to youth joining organizations. So we're looking at factors like, let's say, financial insecurity. And for the case of university students, they don't have enough allowances to begin with, so they would already have logistical issues. If you're talking about those who attend university in rural areas, that would be even more difficult unless you can give them access to transport. And there's also cultural and religious differences. So over the last few years, Malaysia's also seen increased polarization as well, not to mention in the last general election among youth, let's say on the basis of race and religion. And when it comes to human rights, so there can be certain challenges as well. So there might be some issues where you might find greater consensus among young people, where it's easier to rally them. So let's say, for example, refugees, or let's say stateless community, that might be a little bit more easier. However, if you're looking at, let's say, even freedom of expression in Malaysia can be a very difficult issue to navigate because it touches on race, religion, and royalty. And that goes back to different perspectives on what is sensitive and what is not sensitive content. So if you want to get youth themselves to rally around this issue, it can be quite challenging. And yeah, so another one is definitely also weak connections with grassroots movements. So this one, I would like to emphasize that at least over the last 2 to 3 years, one challenge that the civil society sector has seen is young people, the sustainability of the movement. So it can be quite challenging sometimes to get young people to join civil society organizations, and that is extremely, extremely important in ensuring continuity in advocacy, in grassroots education when it comes to human rights issues. So these are just some of the barriers. Next slide, please. Now, last but not least, as to what Swaram has been doing in order to try to address the current landscape in youth, civic, and political participation. So one of it is the most recent one that we've had actually last year is Forum Anak Muda Swaram. So Forum means forum, Anak Muda means young people. So the Young People's Forum. So last year we did launch this initiative, this Forum Anak Muda initiative, and this one under this umbrella, we are looking at collaborating with university student associations to conduct activities, but more importantly, to support any work they would like to do when it comes to exercising fundamental freedoms, let's say freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and etc. Because what we do see is that there are some young people who are very, very, very passionate in wanting to pursue social change and to actually, go on the quote unquote activist route. But the thing is, they face barriers such as not having immediate role models to refer to for advice, for guidance, and etc. And also not having that ecosystem to have solidarity and support because the university environment is really very restrictive. And so with the Forum Anak Muda Swaram initiative, that's the role that we aim to play, to cultivate this generation of activists that can sustain themselves and go on to empower others around them. And so the Forum Anak Muda Swaram does try to get university students themselves to engage in direct actions, sit-ins, pickets, etc., like directly advocating and being a part of us to advocate for human rights issues so that they get a sense of how advocacy is like at the grassroots level. Last but not least, for Scholar Activism Swaram, that's something that we're looking to reactivate. It's a human rights education program that we carry out with university students, comprising education, practical activities, critical discussions, and etc. So that's about it. And so in short, there is resilience among young Malaysians. It's just a matter of regenerating them through certain mechanisms. It might be long term though. And last but not least, the important role of universities in accessing youth and trying to create change among the young people when it comes to mindsets and also engagement in civic participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Janelle. I will have some more questions for you later on, but now just a very quick comment, if you will. I'm interested when you mention, the activism in the 70s. So I want to hear from your own opinion. What can we as young people in this age, the 2020s, can learn from what has been done or what steps were taken by youth during that day?
It would take a little bit of a prompt lah, because I'm not sure if you're aware of the difference between the university students before the COVID-19 pandemic and university students after. From what Suram has observed personally, for the university students that came out of university after the pandemic, well, one, they have been in the online classroom throughout their years of study. Second, they were already very much overwhelmed with real world problems even before they came out from university, so such as financial insecurity, difficulty getting jobs, and etc. And if you look at civil society sustainability, when it comes to jobs, comparatively speaking, it would be less attractive, compared to, let's say, a corporate job for many of the young people. So that's really a barrier that we're facing. However, in order to sort of one important element that I would say young people can consider is definitely to mobilize them. At least this is the Malaysian context, to mobilize themselves. This is a very, very important element because this was what was seen very heavily in 1970s. I mean, 1970s saw the political vibrancy that it had, and it was because the university students themselves, they were so actively mobilizing themselves to do many, many things, going on roadshows to visit communities, engaging with policymakers on what they think what issues should be resolved, going down to the ground to visit, let's say, indigenous rural communities, even farmers, and any other marginalized groups, to see what issues affect them, and then trying to find ways to work with them to advocate for change. So this mobilization effort, I don't think it will be any lacking when it comes to the young people of today. In fact, they actually have a lot more resources and avenues in light of the knowledge that's out there, and also the people that they can refer to. So my advice, it comes down to this mobilization, and also to ask for help, because there are civil society organizations out there who will be more than happy to collaborate. It's just a matter of the civil society organizations knowing that they want to engage in this, and making it known that they want to engage in this can be a very, very important first step forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I want to move to Miss Lillian. Miss Lillian would talk about the situation in Myanmar, in a situation drought with insecurity and violence. But even then, activism, especially from youth and from women, are, they're growing strong and they're quite resilient. So with that, Miss Lillian, can you provide a picture of the situation nowadays, as well as your recommendations?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for my chance. I'm Lilian. I'm the founder of the Politics for Women Myanmar, and thank you for inviting me at this forum to present on behalf of the Politics for Women Myanmar on this critically important topic: changing role of the women and youth in politics of Myanmar. So next slide, please. Yes, next slide. Let's start with the introduction of the Spring Revolution and how it's changing the political landscape of the Myanmar. We all know that on the 1st February of the 2021, the military staged a coup in Myanmar. This destroying a fragile democratic transition of Myanmar for 10 years. We all have suffering the brutalities of the military dictatorship regime for 3 generations. My grandfather, father, also me, are facing a lot of the brutality of the military dictatorship regime. And so fears its return more than death itself. This profound fear and determination for change give birth to what we now call the Spring Revolution. The Spring Revolution represents more than just oppression to the military rules. It is again all forms of the oppression in Myanmar. It has opened the first door to a new chapter for the sake of the equalities, freedom, and justice in Myanmar society. The remark of this revolution was initiated and led by the young and women who have previously been denied decision-making power in the politics and society. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the current situation of the Myanmar. Every day, everything is destroyed dramatically since the coup. About estimately 60 conflict incidents are happening every day in every world. We can see world, right? With a higher rate death. The military conduct 10 to 15 airstrikes daily, result in the death of the 3 to 10 civilians each day. And 1 in every 15 people are internally displaced in Myanmar. And at the same time, the countless number of the people flee to the neighbor country like Thailand, Bangladesh, Malaysia, to the ASEAN neighborhood country. Most of these IDP and refugees are from the vulnerable population, mostly women, children, elderly, and people with a disability, and disease patient. There's a lot of other critical issues that we even can't imagine, like over 30,000 political prisoners suffering human rights violation in the... Please, next slide. Please also. Yes. So there are lots of other critical issues that we even can't imagine, like over 30,000 political prisoners are facing human rights violation in the prison behind the scenes that we already forget about that. Ordinary people are struggling with the economic collapse and deteriorating healthcare services, especially affecting the pregnant women, children, aging, and chronic disease like HIV, TB, cancer patient a lot, and collecting education system. That's the worst thing for the future. Only 20% of the people can attend the school under the military regime. And we are facing the widespread electricity shortage. Only just 2 hours a day we can use the electricity. This all will impact a huge in the future. There is a very, very big impact. Myanmar is so unfortunate, but after 28 March, we are facing a very big earthquake in Sakai, Mandalay, and North Siam State. These areas are the main conflict area of this Spring Revolution that cannot make a well plan for the rescue process and support system due to the coup. The military never care about the people's lives. They never care. They just care about to grab the political power of the state. Totally. Just they're trying for their power. Next slide, please. I would like to share the journey of the Spring Revolution. Indeed, the Spring Revolution have begun with the non-violent resistance. This effort represents not just oppression through the military rules, it began a political revolution, radical challenge to the patriarchy and a collective longing for the federal democracy country. That is a very beautiful revolution for us. The owner was brutally attacked and killed the people protest in public space in daytime and arrest a lot of the protesters at night, even in the first week of the protest, even in the first day of the protest. That's why this action lead to the defensive and offensive resistance. Now, more than 174 military bases have been seized by the revolutionary, including 2 key military commands. Resistance forces have captured 92 towns across the 67 townships. That is 1/3 of our township numbers. This is the first biggest territory occupation by the revolutionary forces in more than 70 years of so-called the civil wars. That is, the junta never expect that they will lost their territory in the Spring Revolution. Next slide, please. So Spring Revolution, next slide, please. Yeah, we can see that Spring Revolution contain a lot. Spring Revolution is more than regime change action. It's become a political revolution. Historically, we can see that political participation was dominant by men, typically over 40 years old from the urban area and with the military connection. Very few people grab the all power of the country. Though the Spring Revolution has dramatically shifted this paradigm toward a more inclusive political landscape. We can see that very clearly in the photo, right? This represents not just a change in who holds the power, but a fundamental transformation in how politics function in the society. We can see that youth, women, and ethnic people fill the gap of the political vacuum after the coup and lead the Spring Revolution immediately after the coup. That is the biggest change for our politics. Next slide, please. Yes, our country is a very patriarchal country, and so women role have undergone. Women role is like a housewives and consider a very secondary sex and facing oppression in their daily life, in politics, and in society. Though in critical time, women have emerged as an active participant and leaders in the Spring Revolution. Main actor in the people's security and humanitarian works, central figure in the local governance and government system. They themselves became a change agent and human rights defender, working on the multiple fronts. Next slide, please. Youth is also the same. Youth are once marginalized in the political decision-making process. Youth voice never heard by the political decision maker before the coup, but now they step into the crucial role, leading the Spring Revolution along the women and marginalized people, becoming the backbone of the People Defense Force, while also conducting the humanitarian work a lot, taking responsibility in the local governance and government system, standing as the human rights defender for all people. Nevertheless, next slide, please. Nevertheless, we are still fighting and facing a lot of the challenges. We are still fighting for the limited representation in the leadership position and ongoing gender-based violence. At the same time, continuous marginalized with the many voices remaining unseen and unheard, especially women and minority. This is the current situation of the Myanmar. Next slide, please. I'm very happy to present this part. We also recognize that international community is a very important factor to end the dictatorship. Let me stress here that the international community response, particularly the ASEAN 5-point consensus, has been profound and adequate for us. Even the junta agreed the 5-point consensus. They still attack and killing the civilian every day everywhere. The international community is still taking no adequate action on the junta. The important point is that we all are failure to recognize that the situation on the ground have fundamentally changed, and the people would like to end the military regime with no excuse, and would like to be a real federal democratic country, not want to come back before the 2021. Here is the request. Just next slide, please. Here is the request for, I would like to stress now, please stand for the people power and self-determination of our peoples. Please stand for the democracy, not just in name. We support the communities that we are the fundamentally revolutionary of the democracy for the world, not for our country just only. We is a significant battleground. Spring Revolution is a very significant battleground between the dignity and consistency of the international principle, democratic norms, and collective works of the human rights defender, and the brutal, cruel, barbaric military and authoritarian regime. Despite the seatbelt, the emergence of the women and youth as a leader in Spring Revolution, give us hope for a more inclusive democratic future, and courage, not able to accept the digital at all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So just a brief recap. So the military coup and the ongoing resistance has fostered opportunities for women and youth to be more engaged in the democratic process. This is a good development. There are gaps ongoing. And the important thing to see for the future is how this engagement continues to grow and how women and youth can be more inclusive in ongoing discussions around Myanmar's future. With that, I would want to move to Dr. Allen. Dr. Allen will provide a viewpoint from Taiwan. As someone working closely between Taiwan and countries in the region meaning Southeast Asia region, what are your thoughts, Dr. Yang, around how Taiwan and Southeast Asia can build better cooperation in this regard?
Thank you. I hope my voice is clear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, once again, I would like to thank the organizer, the Asian Center, for the kind invitation to me so that I can speak at this very prestigious forum and to learn from all the panelists and the audience. Yeah, I think the moderator also raised an important issue, the connectivity between Taiwan and Southeast Asia, our neighbors. My remark will be more focused on how to enable the young activism solidarity between Taiwan and Southeast Asia, and also to echo the two questions mentioned earlier in the beginning of this session. And next, please. Next, please. Yes, my name is Ellen Yang. I'm speaking on behalf of in my personal capacity as the professor of Southeast Asia Study, as well as the executive director of Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. Well, I think today's topic is quite timely and important, and our previous two distinguished panelists raised a good example in the case of Malaysia and also Myanmar. My very quick response to the earlier question, the barrier for the youth in politics in terms of in government as well as in the civil society need to address, I think, two key elements. Number one is the configuration of the in and out, the in-system and outside the system connectivity. That's one thing. And number two, is there any healthy and resilient circulation between the youth in civil society and its impact in the politics structure? I think Taiwan's case can shed some light on the ongoing democratic progress in this region, and also to help shape the civil society solidarity. Well, dating back to 1920s, I think Taiwan's case is quite unique. Dating back to 1920s, we had the earlier stage of the student-led activism in Taipei, and that was the very important resistance against the unfair treatment of the young student during the Japanese colonial rule. And that also, until now, 2025, it has been a century journey of the student-led movement in Taiwan. And I think, if I may, I would like to summarize this long journey. Well, in terms of the modern practice after 1970s, Taiwan's youth activism and movement was to promote democracy that is related to the democratic facilitation. While the more recent, starting from 1990s, including the recent Sunflower Movement 1.0 and 2.0, which we call that the Bluebird Action, happened last year, is to consolidate democracy, which refers to democratic consolidation. And my presentation today argues that the new waves of the student-led movement in Taiwan not only enlighten the political contention domestically, but also facilitate an external appeal across the national boundary, promoting democratic as well as the civil society solidarity between Taiwan and Southeast Asia neighbors, just as the moderate asked earlier. Next, please. Next, please. Yes. I think I can try to summarize 5 key elements or characteristics of Taiwan's youth activism so that this kind of the lesson can be shared and learned through the mutual reciprocal process between Taiwan and our neighbors. Number 1, as I mentioned, the century journey. So that is a time-honored tradition. So it has been almost 100 years, starting from 1920s until now. And it was progressive and evolutionary. And number 2, this student-led activism in Taiwan went beyond the campus. So it's not within the campus, it's outside the campus and reach out to the locality. And the network and the strong civil society as the environment that nourish this going beyond campus characteristics. Number 3, I think it's more recently, actually starting from 1990s, the young activists, they learn to utilize the technology, starting from the website, internet, and also more recently to the social media, through some new ICT equipment, which can be easily seen. And that utilization of new technology helps for networking, for mobilization, as well as for communication across the border. Number 4, which is also important to the circulation and configuration of this youth in politics, the legacy of those youth activism is to increase the impact to the real politics. For example, that nourish the political reform starting in 1990s, and also some of the young leaders and those young activists become the insistent reform supporter, and they have been elected as the legislator, as the councillor, and also as the elected officials. And they also brought about the insistent reform. And more recently, I think that is very important. That is for the regional influence, as we all learn from the young activists that the Milk Tea Alliance has been shaping during a few years ago through the online mechanism, but they have some concrete practice on the offline engagement. Next, please. Next, please. How Taiwan's experiences, please go backward one slide. Yeah, unpacking the regional connectivity. I think, yeah, the movement in Taiwan is not only from the traditional class confrontation, but Taiwan's democracy has given many valuable inspiration to our Southeast Asian friends, such as open media environment, clean and transparent election, and also the campaigns, efficient vote counting, and also the use of innovative technology. Next, please. The right-hand photo is the Milk Tea Alliance. It's not only online, it's some of the advocacy poster and network engagement happen on the campus of Taiwan's leading university. So we also noticed that the cross-national university communication, especially for the young activist group, they communicate and support with each other, and that help this multi alliance take shape. So there are 9 points that I would like to raise here is addressing how Taiwan's experiences matter to youth activism in Southeast Asia. Number 1 is the mutual communication and learning from the engagement, mobilization, and also the policy impact. Number 2, to curate solidarity and support, such as the materialization of the Milk Tea Alliance that refers to the on-site rally, online supporting, and also the discussion group and preparatory work for something big. Number 3 is networking with like-minded partners among the youth activism and young student club across the country. Number 4, stimulating democratic awareness and action. Number 5, references to tactics and strategy, especially on the mobilization and also on how to negotiate with the authority and even the police. Number 6, strengthening the international linkage. So we find out some young leaders from Southeast Asia country, they came in their personal capacity to Taiwan to meet with their friends and partners in nourishing those international solidarity. And number 7, media and publicity strategy. Taiwan's case in mobilization and also in speaking to the international is quite valuable as an important strategy to gather more support from different corners of the society, and also to seek important support from the international. And that is something that Taiwan's experiences matter. And 8, raising legal and human rights awareness. And finally, is continuous support from activist group from Southeast Asia country. We can see, I conduct some interview and also the participatory observation in the Bluebird operation last year in 2024. And I met some of the young activists representative from Southeast Asian countries. So totally, I calculated there are 11 organizations from 7 Southeast Asian countries to come to Taiwan to take part in this rally against the unfair and illegal legalization of our parliament. Next, please. So I think the time is quite limited. So I would like to make a quick conclusion. Taiwan's activists enjoy 3 important features: high degree of autonomous. Number 2, emphasize citizen participation and democratic value. Number 3, make good use of digital media and also the innovative technology. And those young activist leaders, after the successful networking and mobilization and rally, they continue their effort in engaging the politics, and some of them join the political party, and some of them join the campaign and successfully be elected as the government official or as the legislator, and they continue their momentum in doing the reform within the system. And that is a case happened in Taiwan. And to wrap up, there are 3 important notion of Taiwan's student activism. That is, it is actionable. So the size is actionable and also starting from the campus and going beyond the campus. Number two, it is networked. So not only the individual student take part in this, they are learning from each other and networked with other community organization, NGO, civil society organization, as well as the activist group. And number three, it is related to a broader political and economic reform or defending the national integrity and sovereignty of Taiwan instead of only struggling for the class confrontation. And finally, starting from 2016, under the presidency of Madam Tsai Ing-wen, the people-centered new southbound policy facilitate an even closer exchange and partnership between Taiwan and our neighboring countries, especially among the young activists. They come to Taiwan to show the mutual support to our young activist group. And I do believe that this incumbent president, President Lai Ching-te, commitment in continue the new southbound policy plus will further strengthen the civil society connectivity and solidarity between Taiwan and the region. So I think I should stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. So just a brief conclusion of Dr. Yang's point. So the key characteristic that we can see from Taiwan's experience and what we can see and maybe adapt it to our own respective contexts, like Dr. Yang summarized, it's actionable, it's networked, and it is connected to the broader reforms. Within that, though, I am quite interested in 2 points. The first point is that activism, like Dr. Yang mentioned, is a time-honored tradition. I think from what we can see in the region is that activism is not new, like the case that Malaysia show, but also other countries, Myanmar and even Thailand here. Youth activism has been going on for a while, but creating a sense of it being a timed honored tradition is something quite interesting and something that we can learn to do. And the second point that he also mentioned is that there is a legacy between youth activists when they're young, and when they grow up, they go into politics, they become MPs, or become elected leaders later on. And this would also closen the gap between politics and civil society. And this makes these two sort of different circles, more overlapping. So these are very interesting points. And now I want to shift further, going back to politics in a more closer sense, and in Thailand. So Kun Chompunut Kap, so I want to focus on the role of women in politics in Thailand, but also if you can in the broader region. What are you seeing in this sense, and what are the next steps?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me in this panel, and also good morning to everyone in the room and also in the online participants. Since we have been sitting here, I would like to sense check. We talk a lot about youth activism, youth participation in politics. I just want to see in this room, like how many of you has been engaged in youth activism in your country at any point in the past? I see some hands. Also on the online, you can click reactions or something to show that you've been engaged in youth activism. And how many of us has at some point thought about being being in politics? I mean, in terms of formal politics, being politician, member of parliament. I see some hands. Any more people? Only a few. Okay, we'll see. barriers, the challenges. I mean, in the first panel, they said the second panel will talk about solutions, but it might be difficult. I might leave you in disappointment, but let's see more of the barriers, challenges, and you might see why there are less women in politics in the Southeast Asia country, maybe in Asia overall. So in WFD, next slide, please. Next, please. Okay, we work on in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Laos right now. We work on the program focusing on women's political leadership, especially in the formal politics. So we don't just work with the women themselves, but we work with the institutions around them, the environment around them, aiming to have more enabling environment for women to be in the decision-making level. So I will lay out my presentation drawing from the key points, the highlight points from a few research pieces that we did since 2022, 2023 when we started this program. So next slide, please. To see women in political leadership roles, I mean, I don't want you to see just one chunk of identity as women as one box, because in the research we did in 2022, the researchers interviewed 45 women political leaders in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we found that there are different types, different typologies of the women who were in the role of women political leaders. The first common one is the networker. So those who are who have their personal network, their background to get their role themselves into the leadership role. So the networker could be from commonly seen from political family background. So they have their own network in their constituency enough that they would be recruited in the political party to be the candidate. And there are also those from non-political family members or background that they have their network enough to have them recruited by the political party to run in the election or in the candidacy, but they do face maybe different types of barriers still to enter political party, especially those who are not from the political dynasty. The second type is the trailblazer, those who have enough resources, enough financial backup or knowledge and skills and position enough that they will just start their own organizations or political parties and go straight into the leadership role. And the last type is the activists. So those who want to make a change through the formal political means, so with the background of doing some specific policy advocacy and activism, they want to turn into political mean and run in the candidates in the election. So this last group, the activists, they face the biggest barrier, and usually it's the state violence. As this morning and a few panelists have mentioned about their activism, that a lot of youth got the political charges, even detained, or state surveillance, state intimidation. So for them to make their way up into the formal politics is also a challenge. So seeing these different types, I mean, one woman might not belong to one single type, but they might also belong to a few different types. But that shows in working in these fields, like we need to consider different support measures by different stakeholders to support them into the leadership role. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the violence against women in the politics that we are talking about? It's not only like a usual gender-based violence, but by the definition of the UN Women, it's the act or threat of physical, sexual, psychological violence that prevent women from exercising or realizing their political rights. And that also includes from running for political office, exercising their votes freely, or to campaign freely, or enjoying the freedom of speech and assembly. So in WFD, we see that violence against women in politics happen because we don't have enough women in the decision-making roles to make a policy that would include more women in the politics. And it's also the cause for stopping more women to join the politics. So this is why we are focusing around this area. Next slide, please. So from the survey, from the research data collection back in 2022 in 3 countries, from the 45 persons that the researchers interviewed, 88% of them reported that they encountered or have encountered some types of violence. And the highest rank here in this data collection is the hate speech. So it might be hard to detect by the fact-checking groups or organization. I mean, we will see further in the presentation. But the second rank of the violence, the second type is the state surveillance, state intimidation. And that's also quite significant in Thailand context as well because of the past over 10 years of the resistance of citizens against the military coup and military-backed government. And the other types are more of the online violence in different types. And that was also physical threat of death and rape also did online. But then all this online violence also led to some point the real violence in the daily life of the women politicians as well. Next slide, please. So from the research that we did, many types of the barriers, but the top 3 were the lack of financial resources, sexism, and state repression. And we saw that political parties and security agencies are the biggest institutional barriers to these women's political leadership. Next slide, please. So first, if we talk about the structural barrier, I would take this financial barrier, the cost of politics, for the women to enter politics and to maintain their career in political leadership. So in WFD, there is a separate program doing the research on the cost of politics in different countries. And Thailand, this research was launched back in 2024, last year. So this is the highlight to just let you know how expensive it can be in Thai, running for the Thai election. So the campaign spending is not actually the beginning of the expenses of the politics. Or when someone think about entering politics, the research found that about a year or 2 before the general elections, if somebody decide to run in the next election, they would already start investing in what the researcher called here the candidate recognition. So they would spend time in the community activities, they would spend time to appear in public to gain some recognition from their constituencies, that knowing that they or this person will be running in the next election, and that already costs money for them to invest. Or some of them would reduce their time from their career to spend more time in the community, and that's also like cause the loss of their monthly salary and income. Although people who have resources, they might think that they don't lose anything because they are just like using their own expenses, their own cost. But I mean, overall, we might see this is why one of the reason or one of the factors why youth or young people without resources would make decision to run in election. And it might be small for you to see, but the purple arrow on the top, the candidate recognition. Let's see the overall how much they spend in a year or 2 before running the election. The purple arrow is the constituency MP, so they can spend something between 250,000 Thai baht up to more than 1 million baht in that 1 or 2 years before the election. And during the campaign period, although the Election Commission of Thailand, they do have the spending limits of the campaign. For constituency candidate, the limit is 1.9 million. But if look at the figure on the right-hand side, the campaign period, the yellow arrow, it could go up to more than 100 million in some of the constituency. And of course, this is not reported in the official campaign spending under the Election Commission. I mean, all the report would try to comply by the law, but in reality, the spending is very expensive. And especially in the constituencies that the elections are very competitive. And the aftermath it doesn't end there. After the election, if those who are elected, the research also found that some of the candidates, they also have some spare money just for them to pay for the lawyers in case they have a lawsuit against them or the electoral complaints. So this is like the overall picture of how expensive the election or being in the political position can be. And for the campaign spending, the highest cost, three highest costs are under the labor costs, the posters and print media, and the vehicle rental for the campaign team. And in the research on the ASEAN region, the different research, I mean, it confirms the information that like the 9 women politicians that were interviewed, they ran the election and relied on their own financial resources when running for the office and also while in the office. So meaning that the support from political parties might not be there, or it really depends on political parties if they would have any support, finance support to the candidates. Next slide, please. And for the political party, I mean, I would stress at political parties because they are the main gatekeepers to select, recruit, or not recruit women into their candidacy. So in Thailand, the constitution, it mentions very broadly about political parties. When they select the candidates for their party list, they should consider equally between men and women. But look at the number. If we see, I mean, we have 2 ballot system, constituency, and the closed list party list from the political party. The overall figure here is the number of women against men in different candidacy level. But overall, I mean, the percentage of the women is about 19 to 20% against the male candidates, all level. And there is no provision enforcing gender quota or specific affirmative actions in our electoral law. Next slide, please. Okay, and to zoom in the party list candidates, I mean, in the last election, 2023, the party can nominate up to 100 party list candidates. Let's look at the top 20 rank, because these are like the most promising ranks that would pass the election. So at the bottom, Pheu Thai, Move Forward, PPRP, Phumjai Thai, like the top 20 party lists, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 persons. I mean, see how they prioritize the women in their party list candidates. So this is why I stress on the role of political parties. Although in the previous election, some political parties, they might apply some affirmative actions. They claim that they have like 1 out of 5 women in their list. In the case of Democrat Party, for example, but we still need to question whether that 1 out of 5 women in the list is enough, because international recommendation is like 30%, or now it's like 50-50 men and women in their recruitment and their candidacy list, right? A few political parties, though, I mean, they claim that they don't apply gender balance or gender quota, but they do consider intersectionality in their party list ranks. Like they apply space for those who have the labor background or minority background or activist background and stuff like that. But still the lens of equality between men and women are not really there. And the last point I stress here on political party is women from lower socio-economic backgrounds can become national politicians, but it's extremely rare. It requires quite a huge intervention from political parties to recruit them into their party. Next slide, please. Okay, and the cultural barriers, the most obvious part here in the cultural barriers, I think we can see from the online space. It, I think, has become the new challenge for the women political leaders, especially the young politicians. I mean, they have the direct access to their own social media. It's a cheap way to communicate and bridge the gap between politicians and voters in terms of promoting, communicating of what they are doing, what policy they are advocating. But that also like sort of two-sided swords. It brings a lot of violence into the online space and more obvious, and that creates a lot more like long-lasting impacts, mental impact, especially psychological impact to the women political leader. I mean, we saw pervasive online harassment, and the online harassment has been kind of normalized in Thai society, in Thai social media. We saw a lot of factors. I mean, there are those also citizens, I mean, voters who might challenge, I mean, have the norms, have the belief of the patriarchal politics, believing that women are not good enough or not competent in political space, but there are also the operated network, like information operation, that build this kind of narratives, and it keeps being repeated in the online. And in the small data collection on online violence, we did see the impacts towards the women political leaders. I mean, they have a big psychological impact, and a lot of them started to want to withdraw from the political space. They don't want to face the public when they are invited because of feeling embarrassed, even though some of the contents might be photoshopped or not facts. And the platform also is another challenge, that they don't have the enough enforcement on their policy to reduce the online harmful narratives. And we saw a lot of creativity of the online users in Thailand using emojis, using the mix of Thai and English language in their comments to avoid being detected by the system. So that's why those content remains. And when person report to the platform, it takes time for the content to be managed or put down. So that's why a lot of people don't want to take direct action and leave it there on the online. And the institution, like political parties, parliaments also don't have any measures to support. They kind of leave it to the personal issue when the women face this kind of violence. And we had a comment from a women politicians. I mean, they say the same thing, or they might be speaking about the same issue in the parliament, for example, the issue of Rohingyas. But the female politicians are always the one that have more targets, more attacks online compared to the male counterparts. And the coordinated campaigns, the network, or the online information operation is also there, and it's also amplify this kind of harmful narratives in the Thai society against the politician, especially the young, the female politicians. Next slide, please. Okay, I will conclude here. I mean, I'm not listing a lot of recommendations or conclusion for ways forward, but the panelists in the morning also mentioned something that is similar and also very relevant to our context. But for institutions, the role of political parties, parliament, and also social media, I mean, I would stress here is the political parties should adopt more affirmative actions, not only to bring more women into the party, but also encourage them or give them the space to be in the decision-making level and push their own policy. Because in political parties that have women, it doesn't mean that they give the space for women to push the policy. It's still more of the top-down culture in Thailand. And political parties should adopt more internal gender-sensitive policy as well to take care more of the finance, to allow more level playing fields, support campaign expenditure, and also establish safeguards against the harassment and support a better environment, safer environment for female politicians. And also there should be a dedicated parliamentary or governmental bodies to monitor online and also like physical offline violence against the women politicians as well. Because if we don't have enough data of violence that happen against women politicians, I mean, it's very hard also for policies to directly respond to the cause of the issue. So, I mean, a part of our work is also encouraging government bodies and linkage with the civil society to do the gender observatory on violence against women in politics, so we can understand this issue more in depth as well. And for the social media platform and media agencies, if any one of you are working with these institutions, I mean, I would encourage you to work with them on business and human rights, on having them strengthen their policy enforcement, having effective partnership with the cross-stakeholder. And also there should be a legal framework and law enforcement, like there are cases of good pieces of law in Singapore, in Philippines on online harassment, and Indonesia. So in Thailand, we don't have that kind of law enforcement yet. So I think it's good to connect the stakeholders in the region working on this issue and move forward together as well. So that would be the end of my presentation. And if any one of you in the next slide, if you are interested in our report, you can scan and read more about the findings as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Chongpunut. Yeah, the data is very interesting to see the current landscape. The way forwards is quite long, so I was only able to read some of the points, but it's already quite insightful, and we will take more time in the afternoon to discuss or to go into detail and also to create an action plan out of these way forward. And I look forward to what all the participants could come up with in the afternoon. But for this panel, I would want now to move to Ms. Nadia, who will talk about the ways we can increase youth civic engagements in the context of increased repressions. So Ms. Nadia will talk about a couple of case studies in Southeast Asia, and she will focus on knowledge exchange practices. So please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for my voice. It's a little bit sick, but I hope you can hear me well enough. I will try to be brief. I work for the People in Need, which is the Czech organization, Czech human rights organization, humanitarian organization. And in Southeast Asia, my department is mostly engaged in Vietnam, but we're also looking at the general regional infrastructure of protection of human rights defenders and civic activists. So first, I would like to say that in the recent weeks, I read an article that said that only 29 countries in the world are now being considered liberal democracies, and 75% of people live under authoritarian or dictatorship regimes. Which means that when we're talking about youth engagement and civil society work in the world, we're talking mostly about, statistically, mostly about the people who are involved in this activism with a great risk to their safety and security. So my presentation would focus on those kinds of risks, but also on the, well, if not solutions, at least suggestions that we see as a potential to alleviate a little bit of those risks and help young people be more engaged, particularly in civil society work. First of all, as I mentioned, of course, dictatorships and authoritarian regimes learn from each other extremely well. So a lot of practices we see, and I will do the case of Vietnam particularly. We see in Vietnam, we've seen all over the world. So for us, it's very important to look at those practices as not a isolated cases, but more of a example of widespread practices, and to see how those root causes can be addressed. So first of all, in countries like Vietnam, obviously the biggest threat for youth activists are the potential prosecution with the legal means, but also persecution in out-of-court manners. In legal terms, we're talking about arrests, detentions, accusations of very seemingly non-political crimes like tax evasion and abuse of democracy and violation of the public order, but obviously also political ones, like a very ridiculous article in Vietnamese criminal code, abuse of democratic principles, which sounds very interesting if you put it in the criminal code of the country, or political articles like anti-state propaganda. So these are some of the charges that not only young activists but also young activists face. We're not talking about them as an isolated group. We're also seeing a huge generational gap between established human rights organizations and human rights activists and new emergent civil society leaders. And the response to such persecution is very different, because obviously more established human rights defenders with more understanding of the risks, they usually, especially in these last 2 years, go into exile, particularly in Thailand, and flee the risk and physically remove themselves from the risky situations. They usually have families, they usually have dependents, so it's a very obvious choice. While young activists are mostly staying in the country until the last possible moment and ultimately go to prison unless they escape when they can. So this creates, in all over the world, not only in Vietnam, but this creates a huge gap between two civil societies, one that still stays inside and partially imprisoned, and that one that is working from exile. An important task for international community is to support the bridges that should be built between those two civil societies in order for them to be efficient in continuing their work. What is particularly interesting in case of Vietnamese civil society is that until recently, there were so-called safer topics that civil society, particularly young activists, could work on without any major issues and without the fear of persecution. For example, LGBTQI plus issues. Hanoi Pride was organized until last year when it was banned without any hitch, or things like informal education of, I'm sorry, that promoted very soft civic engagement topics in the country. And now those activists who were organizing such activities are also persecuted. So generally, we see the general trend of increased persecution and increased risks for civil society actors in countries like Vietnam, not only in Southeast Asia, but all over the world. For those of the activists who do flee their country, we now face a different issue, which is where is it safe for them to continue their work? A lot of activists from all over Southeast Asia who have to flee their countries go to Thailand as the nearest, almost to some extent safe country. And obviously, in Thailand, we now see the increase in what is called transnational repression, which is the trend, again, not regional trend, global trend, but the trend nevertheless, when the countries of origin are able to almost easily and freely operate in the so-called safe countries to continue the persecution of the exiled activists. We saw the recent very loud cases of extradition of civil society actors from Thailand to their countries of origin. We know about the cases of security services of the countries where the activists are coming from to Thailand, operating and extorting and threatening the activists on the ground with a very alarming ease. So although Thailand is perceived as a safe country to continue the operation, including like organizing events, etc., this perception is very fragile considering the political situation and relationship between Thai authorities and the authorities of those countries. So the question arises here if Thailand can be considered this regional hub for civil society actors, or if it still requires a lot of work. Next slide, please. At the same time, especially while we're still talking about the civil society actors and youth civil society actors who are staying in the country and are engaging in the civil society work, we have to differentiate between several things. So a lot of them are engaged, are choosing to be engaged in more safer, so-called safer topics, like I mentioned before, like previously in Vietnam, LGBTQI issues or informal education, which means that those activities can be organized offline, the networks can be created, the public can be engaged, and the outreach might be much bigger. Versus when we're talking about basic freedoms, so freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, basic first and second generation human rights and political rights. And this is where youth activists have to become very creative in how to promote those topics and engage the audience. And a lot of them are working online, which creates a lot of pressure on the internet infrastructure in the country, considering in a lot of those countries, internet is very heavily surveilled. It's not that easy thing to do, so they need a lot of technological support, how to make their activities safe. And then obviously there are risks associated with inviting wrong people into the mix, people who will work with the government, who would give up the activities that the activists are doing. So the risks for their safety are increased immensely. This creates the necessity for what we call backup plans. And backup plans, unfortunately, cannot be created only inside the country or only by the civil society members of this particular country. Backup plans require the whole international protection infrastructure. It requires international organizations, international human rights organizations, intergovernmental organizations, like in some cases, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or other regional human rights structures. In Europe, it can be Council of Europe. In Latin America, it can be Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, etc., etc. So it requires a lot of support to make sure that the activists are not left alone with those risks that they are facing while doing their jobs. And at the same time, what authoritarian regimes and dictatorships are doing extremely well, they're putting a lot of effort into isolating civil society, isolating on all fronts. First of all, isolating activists from their communities and from their constituencies to make sure that civil society doesn't have the juice to or support to do their work. So when they're persecuted, there is no one there to defend them because they're not known or not needed anymore. But second of all, also isolating civil society from outside world, from international communities, from international networks, from international organizations, from their counterparts in other countries. Because this isolation makes sure that civil society becomes toothless and absolutely irrelevant in regardless of what they're doing. Next slide, please. So from our perspective, in order to address that, People in Need created the Emerging Leaders Fellowship as one of the many examples of how this can be addressed. We're trying to boost the intra-regional cooperation, and we are organizing the fellowship in the Czech Republic for young civil society leaders from 4 regions in the world to make sure that they also learn not only from the Czech transition experience as a country that went from the communist dictatorship to the democratic society, but also from each other, to learn from the practices that their counterparts in Nicaragua or Azerbaijan or Egypt, what they implore to stay relevant, to stay engaged, and to increase their outreach. So we're trying to make sure that there is at least some kind of of intra-regional exchange that helps civil society be more efficient. We're also using a tailor-made approach, which means that regardless of the topics that civil society actors are working on, we're trying to make sure that the program that we offer them is, and the exchanges between different civil society actors are as tailored to their needs as possible and to their activities as possible, because it's important not to use the cookie cutter method. Next slide, please. I think it's the last one from my side, but I already mentioned the necessity of the security and protection infrastructure in the world. This is the biggest concern that we see in the recent weeks, especially since the new administration in the US came to shaking the civil society world a lot. So there are several questions that we are working on addressing, and one is how to make sure that civil society, especially young civil society actors, how to make sure they're safe while reaching out to their constituencies and while doing the outreach and spreading their activities. And obviously, I'm sorry, it involves a lot of concerns about security checks and technological infrastructure and other types of support that they need from the international community. The second one is how to ensure the protection of the partners, to make sure that they have the safety net to fall onto if and when they face the risk of persecution. And considering the declining funding and I'm sorry, it all ends up with the money, but considering the declining funding that we're seeing in the human rights field, it becomes a big concern of ours that those who need support will not find a way how to get it. We're talking about big international organizations like Freedom House and Frontline Defenders and others that were, through the years, were the safety nets that made sure that activists receive direct aid support, legal support, humanitarian support, relocation support, and there is a big concern that this will not be available anymore because of the situation that we're seeing right now. We're also talking about visa support. Migration becomes a huge political nightmare for democratic countries, and the topic that is being addressed in an extremely brazen way that doesn't consider the needs of people on the run. So it's getting harder and harder for people from the countries like Vietnam or like Myanmar or other dictatorships to make sure that they are accepted in safer countries and that there are opportunities for them to reestablish their lives and continue their work from the safe environment. And the last thing, obviously, it's the importance of the security component and the capacity building. A lot of young activists come into this in their activism with the best of intentions and with idealistic views that they would just like to change the world, or at least change the world around them. And it's extremely important for international community to make sure they're aware of risks. They know how to address the risks, and they know how to make sure that they're safe and continue and their work is sustainable because of the risk assessments, because of the security apparatus that is available on the civil society side around them. I think I will stop there. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. One conclusion that I came to after listening to Ms. Nadia's presentation is that in an environment where there's increasing transnational repression, it is then our role to also increase transnational cooperation and solidarity to counteract that. And of course, one way we can do that is to build the capacity of young emerging leaders in civil society, but also in politics and in governance. So with that, I would want to conclude this panel. We are a bit tight for time, but I hope across the two panels you have got a lot of ideas of what should be done in the next steps. And when we come back after lunch, we can discuss more about this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, our panelists and Ekmongkon for moderating. For now, it's lunchtime. Everybody can enjoy the meal at the planchette room on the 8th floor. You can get there by the elevators. Before you leave, please take your personal belonging with you because we're gonna arrange the table for group discussion in the afternoon. Enjoy your lunch. See you shortly. Oh, one more thing. Anyone forget like this bottle of water? No? Is it? Okay.